been a while since we've had the band together. Let me kind of set the stage for the day, and Todd Jordan is gonna be with us. Back in the craziness of I don't know if it was January or February. I don't know if it was a chance meeting or if it was a planned meeting, but there was a meeting. He comes from the United Way of Greater Kansas City, and the concept came up of how in Kansas City they're helping the state of Missouri, I think, get people connected with TANF funds, if I remember correctly. Is that right? Which to me was intriguing. So in an environment where the state of Kansas is resource constrained, we kind of made an agreement that said, hey, when the craziness of the session is over, let's get the committee back together and let's bring Todd back. We've got, I think, Dr. Whiteside Hicks with us from TANF. This is going to be an informational. Just let's talk about maybe what can we do better for Kansas as we look towards 2026. So with that, Todd, please come up to the mic, and then let's just try to make this as an informational and learning environment as possible. So thank you for being here.
There we go, that better. I have tall people problems, my apologies, so. All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. While we're waiting for the PowerPoint to get queued up, my name is Dr. Todd Jordan. I'm the Vice President of Community Impact and Executive Director of 211 with United Way of Greater Kansas City. I've been with United Way of Greater Kansas City and the United Way Network for about a decade or so. I was raised on the Kansas side of Kansas City, and it's my pleasure to be with you here today to talk a little bit about the United Way Network, what the work we do, and specifically some of the partnerships we have with the public sector, especially a project that we rolled out last year with the state of Missouri involving TANF funds, which I think has been a very unique as well as interesting case study of what the United Way has been able to leverage when it comes to finding ways to help move assistance into the hands of families that really need it. For over 100 years, United Way has been a trusted community partner all across the state of Kansas and all across the country. There's a lot of work we've done every day in convening community, in bringing people together, in leveraging partnerships with nonprofit companies as well as the public sector. I know I've had the chance to meet with a few of you before. I've had a chance to meet with our folks from DCF, and I'm really excited today to do a little bit of a deeper dive into the unique project that we had. Do you want to go to the next slide? So, one thing I want to make clear, United Way, there's a national brand, but we are all independently and locally governed. There are about 20 United Ways operating in the state of Kansas, serving all 105 counties. And so while we are all locally attuned, we also come together as the United Ways of Kansas as sort of a collaborative effort where we can all work together to try and drive the mission forward for helping building a community that'll thrive for everybody across the state. So we have, friends, colleagues in our rural communities, we have colleagues in our urban communities and our suburban communities, and we really have the power to leverage not only our expertise, but our resources, the technology that we've invested in, and a lot of the work that we've been able to do for years in order to connecting partners and connecting to households in need. Our community was together actually last week here at the State House. We might have had a chance to meet with some of you all again, and it's been a great opportunity to show the work that we've been doing. Kind of as a general reminder of the work that we do overall, we are the operator of 211. Hopefully some folks are familiar with what 211 does here across the state. It is a 3-digit 24/7 contact center. It is operated by ourselves as well as our colleagues at United Way of the Plains, which is in Wichita. And it is available for folks, and it is essentially the front door for the health and human service ecosystem. So we maintain database of agencies, of programs, as opposed to what you might get when you Google. We maintain eligibility criteria, the things that you need to show up with when you're making your appointments, how you make your appointments, kind of that next level of information and referral. Obviously, we're a major funder and partner of initiatives. If you've met one United Way, you've only met one United Way. We're usually all very active in health and human services, specifically in emergency assistance, a lot of rent and utility assistance, child care, early childhood education, after school programming. There's a lot of work United Ways tend to do all across the state to convene our community partners. What I also wanted to make real clear, and we'll see if we can get the slide to advance for us. Give that one a shot for me. Part of the reason why we've been that trusted partner is because we're an efficient administration. We have the ability in order to come together in our communities to ultimately leverage dollars and to maximize and put an emphasis on making sure as much money goes back into the community as possible. We're obviously governed locally by our boards as well as by our staff, so the decisions are made by Kansans. For those of you that didn't know, we're one of the pioneers of outcomes measurements in founders and foundations, and I actually have the original book in spiral-bound form from 1994 that United Way put out, which makes me at this point a bit of a dinosaur, but I'm okay with that. What I want to talk to you about today is the project that we launched in the state of Missouri. Last year in 2024, we received several $1,000,000 from the state of Missouri that had come out of the TANF budget. And part of the challenge that we were addressing was that there was not enough money was moving quickly enough into households that were experiencing the impact of inflation, that were seeing higher prices rising, and that there was a lot of concern about how do we move this money, but also specifically make sure that we're touching all 125 counties in the state of Missouri. Yes, sir.
I'm supposed to be chairing this, but I have a question.
Yeah.
So when you say you received several $1,000,000, that was it wasn't for the organization. It was TANF monies to go to clients, right? So
It was the legislator put into the budget, and then Governor Parsons approved several $1,000,000 that went to United Way of Greater St. Louis, and they were the contract holder, and we worked in collaboration with them to negotiate the specifics of the contract with the Missouri Department of Social Services.
So if I'm just trying to make sure I understand the mechanics of what happened, then it was from that point there's a bucket of money,
Yep.
and it says, okay, get this to the right people. Is that essentially what happened, or for the right services?
Yeah. And with DSS, we then worked to specify, okay, there has to be obviously residents of Missouri, 185% or below at the federal poverty level, preferably children in the household, and then they're experiencing an economic hardship. And then there were certain areas that we were providing services, we were providing, payments for. So rent, utilities, childcare, transportation necessary to employment. The one thing I will say is this was not direct cash transfers. All payments were made to the vendors. So we paid the utility company directly, we paid the landlord company directly. That is how we wound up facilitating. So the United Way was, we did the intake of the clients, we screened them, we collected all the documentation, we retained that through a common technology platform that we used across the state, and then we ultimately made the determination on the amount of assistance, collected what we needed to collect from the vendors. So sometimes that meant, we work with a lot of the utility companies. That wasn't really a problem. Landlords, you got to get a W-9 and payment information, and we wound up collecting that and then processing payment to them. The program was incredibly effective. We wound up moving in the span of about 75 days, although really it was that first 60 where we did a lot of it, moving about $3 million in assistance into the hands of households. So, you can kind of see from some of the numbers that I'll provide here. I can kind of keep clicking forward for me. I'd appreciate it. We had, I think, just over a couple thousand applications and about a couple thousand households that were approved for assistance, impacting the lives of about 7,000 Missouri residents. 5,000 of those residents were children. And it really ran the gamut of households where, you're talking single parents, you're talking grandparents who are caring for grandkids. We were not surprised, but ultimately we found this to bearing out with what we're seeing with prices. A lot of households had at least one adult who was working, just not able to make ends meet, in what they're dealing with today, and ultimately needed just that little bit of a help to avert a further catastrophe with what they were dealing with in their situation. The one thing I want to drill down on, especially here in this moment, we didn't get a chance to talk about this, is we really placed an emphasis on making sure that local United Ways made the decision for their community on how to deliver the assistance. So they were essentially, some United Ways are all volunteer run, some United Ways have less than 5 staff, some United Ways are 30, 50, 60. So we essentially offered options where you can do the assistance yourself, you can have a larger United Way do the assistance for you, and all you do is promote the program. We had hybrid models where you could do the assistance, but then you could maybe work with a partner agency in your local community, such as a direct service provider, like maybe a Salvation Army, a community action agency. But ultimately, from the state side, they only ever interacted with the 2 larger United Ways. So really, you kind of only had the buck stopped with us, and if there were issues with accountability, with paperwork, with processing payment, that fell on us to ensure that the network of 20-plus United Ways and 50-plus partners were doing things the right way.
I got to ask a question again. Permission to ask a question. So what was the why? Why come to the United Way? Surely there's other mechanism. Because to me, whether I'm struggling or I just can't recall. Yeah. What was the ask? Why did the state of Missouri come to you and say, hey, help us with this, or we have this idea?
I'd say it was a little bit of both. We came in some ways to the state of Missouri saying, here are the gaps that we're seeing in the communities where we're working, and we have to have additional dollars to support the families and households that are coming through the door. From the state of Missouri side, it was, we know that we have money that we need to ultimately put into these communities. We need a way to do it quickly, efficiently, and with accountability, but we can't really deploy teams to every part and mobilize the same set of community partners that United Way can. Similar to the Kansas side, United Way operates the 211 system in the Missouri side between Kansas City and St. Louis, which meant that we are essentially screening thousands of callers a month who would all fit within these kinds of criteria, which makes it very easy for us to do the kind of outreach to people and make sure that we're getting them. So there was kind of a lot of synergy with efficiency, effectiveness, accountability, and that ultimately from the state side, you're really only working, even though there's a whole network deployed, you're really only having to deal with one entity when it comes down to accountability, and if there's issues, working with them to resolve them. You want to move to the next slide for me?
Can we interrupt again, Doctor? I think Representative Reese has a question, and I really want this informative kind of thing.
Did DCF did they make any changes to the application process? Like they simplified in any, I mean, I know that there's some federal requirements that you have to put in those eligibility applications, but do you know if DCF as a state in Missouri, did they make any changes to modify it?
Yeah, the application was simplified some in order to kind of deal with, we're not really looking at either work requirements or lifetime benefits. It was really focused on if these households are surfacing with this level of poverty, with an economic issue, especially if they've got children in the household, then we need to be moving the assistance into their hands because we can see what are the longer term effects of if they get evicted or get their power shut off. So we worked in collaboration with them in order to develop the common application. Okay. As I shared, there were a lot of elements to what we did, and we moved a lot of money fairly quickly, which was very effective for us. We're really proud of the fact that ultimately we were able to track the program outcomes. As a reminder, we ourselves, we were at some point the state of Missouri came back and said we want to make sure how you spent the money, so they did the external check of essentially the entire program, its results, and the paperwork. We then also, are audited by our internal auditor, our external auditor. We have our internal finance team. And because this amount exceeded the federal dollar threshold, we also were subject to a single audit. So there were multiple levels of checks to make sure that we were not only following best practices, but that we were ultimately accountable for the public sector dollars that were entrusted to us. If you want to move to the next slide. In general, this was not the first time, and I think maybe to your point of why us, why United Way was turned to when it came to how can we ultimately help move this money into the community. We've been a trusted community partner for a long time. With the pandemic, and this is only for United Way of Greater Kansas City, we had a significant amount of funding, I think roughly, about just over $27 million that rolled through us from multiple local jurisdictions, so state or from county as well as city government. We've also been involved, with several different public sector utility programs. The KCK Board of Public Utilities has been a longtime partner, and we last year deployed over $500,000 in utility assistance just for Wyandotte County. These programs, we have primarily not been doing direct cash assistance. We do have private foundation support last year where we did a debit card program, largely also to deal with the effects of inflation. And that was a system where we both deployed those cards internally, screening via 211 and using our own case managers, as well as leveraging staff and agencies that we have in our community. Think your Salvation Army, your Catholic Charities, or your smaller emergency assistance agencies, and deployed about $1 million in assistance to households, primarily, again, households with older adults or households with children that were meeting income thresholds, but then also experiencing a unique economic impact. Last slide for me. So I appreciate the time today and already some of the questions, and look forward to many more. I think what I'd leave you with is a lot of the work that we've done has been largely in response to the needs that we see. And while, we are not the same as Hayes, we're not the same as Dodge, we're not the same as Wichita, all of us see common threads in the work we do with United Way. 211, I can tell you both states, rent and utilities is a constant demand. There's a lot of demand that we're experiencing, and we know from our feedback from our local partner agencies, this is one of the highest area demands that they continue to experience. It's odd for me to not have an ask as somebody who spent a lot of his life in fundraising with United Way, but I'm also happy to be part of the information sharing of what we've done out here, because I do think, given my background as both an academic who's in recovery, there's a lot that I've been trying to just show about how these kind of innovative and effective partnerships are ways in which people can move assistance, we can move dollars, and we can still maintain that level of effectiveness and accountability that we all expect and really enjoy.
Okay. Would you stand for some questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Representative Rivas and Representative Steens.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation. I actually have quite a list here. I'm just trying to get a grasp on this.
No problem.
So, several factors here. So, state of Missouri reached out to you to do this. So, I know you can't really speak for the state of Missouri anymore than what you know, but so did they reduce some of their staffing at the DCF, or did they restructure something? Or I mean, they took a lot of responsibility to you. So, did anything change in the Missouri side?
Obviously, I can't speak for the state, but no, none of that was tied to our particular project. Instead, the staff were more focused in on, hey, we can now work with them in terms of the oversight capacity and let them handle the distribution of the dollars and track the program. So it kind of changed more of the focus, but it was more of a genuine partnership between us and Missouri Department of Social Services that administered the money.
Can I keep going for a second? So then did you get like an administrative fee or something? Because you had a lot of expense here. You may have had additional.
There was an administrative fee of 10% of the total award.
Okay, because you'd have to have something.
There was something to cover staffing costs and.
Order, but I mean,
yeah.
that's a lot big
Yeah.
to ask. So then the part of it when you deal with these families, you're boots on the ground with all these agencies, and some of these families struggle for many reasons, some of which they may need referral for some help with any number of issues. Do you guys also encourage that to try to channel these families into a place where they can find a pathway where they don't need this assistance continually?
Yeah, that's part of the optimal design is we are both doing this with, if you need other things we're not providing, referring back or connecting with 211, and honestly, you don't have to call back in. We can pull up our own database and, hey, you also need food. We're not supporting that, but here's what we can do to get you into a food assistance program. Depending on which United Way or direct assistance agency in which part of the state, they are case managers. That is part of their role. So this was really dollars that help plug into maybe other programs they're already doing. So it's like, I've already got them in case management, but I need some additional money to pay the rent for this household that's already there, or that we need to get them into case management, and this program was a front door to connecting them and let them know there is an opportunity, and then hopefully getting them stabilized.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Steens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for being here today. Representative Rivas actually asked one of my questions. So I have, I think of United Way as being large, right? Very much kind of like high charity, in different countries and everything. And you said you were in Missouri. A couple questions. Are you in other states? And you may have said that and I didn't catch it. And then I'm still trying to understand when you're reaching out, are you reaching out to these people like individually, or do you have like an office that they come to or something? I'm just trying to visualize how that works exactly. Thank you.
Great questions. So United Way is what I would call a federated network. There is United Way Worldwide, which is kind of the umbrella and the steward of the network, but then there are United Way member chapters. So United Way at Greater Kansas City, we serve Johnson and Wyandotte on the Kansas side, Jackson, Clay Cass, Platte on the Missouri side, and we are our own independent 501c3, locally governed by our own board of directors, as is the other 20 roughly United Ways across the whole state of Kansas. So, we could all kind of do our own thing, but we also understand the whole point of our shared collective impact. So there's about 900 plus United Ways across the United States. So yes, we are in other states. But that's, again, this is kind of how we've always operated, but there's also that level of commonality if we understand what we can do together and just the level of shared service and shared demand that we experience. For the outreach question, again, as the operator of 211, I'm getting calls every day from people who are experiencing crisis and don't know where to go. So I could stop there. What we also did was a lot of boots on the ground outreach. So a local utility company who maybe always does like LIHEAP applications, they have a day where they said, hey, you come in, we'll maybe do LIHEAP assistance. Those were days where we would come in and then also do screenings for families to see if they were eligible for the program. We worked with a lot of agencies, our partners in local communities, Catholic Charities, a Salvation Army, a community action agency, as in saying, you always have people coming in the door, but also you can be advertising or being proactive with individuals in your community. So it's both people kind of naturally come to us, but then we're also doing that kind of outbound work to make sure that people are aware.
Thank you.
Committee, any other questions? I've got one more. So the initial block of funding, however much it was, I don't remember, was that for a like fiscal year 24, 25? Is there going to be a fiscal year 26 similar?
That is the request that we have pending. Missouri is working through the budget process much like we are here. And so, yes, we are hopeful that there will be a request and a renewal of the program.
Okay. So if you don't mind, if Dr. Whiteside Hicks here, she's our director of TANF, just to see if there's any reaction, thoughts, yes, no, otherwise. I see a reluctance to approach. No one is going to put you on the spot. And let me preface this with this. When I heard this discussion just a couple, 6-8 weeks ago, it was, oh wow, are we doing anything like this in Kansas? And if we talk to our folks in TANF, would there be an interest? I mean, and just trying to make a connection. That's all I'm trying to do here. I am not trying to run over anybody. I'm just trying to connect something that maybe it works for us, maybe it doesn't. So, Dr. Whiteside Hicks, thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you all for having me. And I don't know if do we have a PowerPoint? If not, it's not that serious. Wow, this is a hot mic. And so while we're getting that pulled up, so this is not a new concept. What I can tell you as we're heading into the presentation is that over the past couple of years, I have been looking at our TANF program to see how we can be more effective with serving families in Kansas. So the vision for my team is that families are stable, connected, and progressing toward their goals. So with that, one of the things that we have done over the last year is to transition our traditional TANF program of we're authorizing benefits for families, and then we do have case managers. We have career navigators who work with those families. But I wanted a more intentional approach to pull in a 2-generational approach, meaning you can help me find a job. You've given me all the tools that I need. I've got a job. Yay, I'm on my way. But then I have a 3rd grader who has behavioral issues at school, and so I keep getting called. I have to leave my job many times to do that, so now I'm fired. So the 2-generational approach says, while you're working with me to help me with that skill set so that I can find a job, we're also someone's connecting me with resources for my 3rd grader, so that what does the school have? Is it a behavioral issue? Is there a medical? What is needed for my child? And how am I being connected to those resources that already exist that someone else is paying for, so that if you can help my child stay in school all day, then I can stay on my job all day, and now my family has a better chance of success. So those are some things that we've been working on. All righty, we're going to jump right in. So just really a high-level overview of TANF spending. The transfers out, federal law does allow for us to transfer 30% of our TANF block grant to the social services block grant and CCDF, but there's a 10% cap for the social services block grant. We use those funds, they go to the prevention and protective services side of DCF, and once those funds are transferred, the funds take on the identity of the social services block grant. So they're no longer being managed by the TANF program. We do also transfer some funds to the Kansas Preschool Program at KSDE, and then we do have budgeted funds that would go to K-State University for Project Impact. And then if we can go to the next screen, please. And then here you can see some of the other expenses that we have. Central office administration, that would be, I have to pay staff to manage the TANF program. Information technology, pretty self-explanatory. KEYS project, KEYS is our eligibility determination system. We do have a shared eligibility system with KDHE for one, so we share that cost. But then we also, our eligibility workers at DCF process TANF, child care, food assistance, LEAP applications, all in the same system. The first three, TANF, childcare, and food assistance, can have the same application. So I can apply for all three of those programs with just one application, and we share the information that's there. Regional offices, that would be our DCF offices around the state. That's where eligibility workers are housed, and they are the ones who are actually processing those applications. And then also, my career navigators are in those regional offices across the state, and those are the ones who are providing the case management for TANF recipients. And next slide, please. Yes.
This is dangerous because I'm digging into memory banks I haven't touched in 6 weeks. And maybe my phone of friends around the room can help. It seems like when either we were looking at either one of the budget recommendations or one of the conversations I recall from earlier in the session, is it challenging to, or have we actually expended those TANF dollars that are out there? I seem to recall some comment about it being difficult in this state, even while we know there's a need, matching and getting the benefits or the services to the individual, and that we were leaving, for lack of better words, maybe leaving stuff on the table. Is that accurate?
Was it a conversation around our TANF balance?
Maybe.
Perhaps?
Maybe. And again, I'm not, don't hold me to it, and I won't hold you to it, because it was probably 5 or 6 weeks ago. But that's one of the reasons why we're here. It seemed like, wow, we might be able to be doing more if that in fact is the case.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons that, so we do have TANF RFPs, requests for proposals, that we send out. Again, I'm trying to be more intentional with those. So what I want to do, like we have 2-gen grantees right now, 2-generation grantees. That was an RFP that we put out. We have 10 organizations, I believe, across the state that we are funding. But it wasn't, here's some money to help families. We wanted to look at what are the needs that we have across the state, identify the need, structure an RFP that would meet the need that we have, and then award funds that way. We do have a TANF balance, and we will use it for things like, oh, there's an unexpected system change that we have to make, and we need a portion of TANF to do that. So we do maintain a balance. Sorry for No, you're fine. You're fine. Yes, ma'am.
I need a clarification.
Yes.
So basically, we get 102 million.
Correct.
Block grant.
Yes.
Okay. And again, well, I'll just make it real quick. We used to have 5 years on it. Now we only have 2 years on it.
Correct.
Okay? But we also have like 4 different guidelines of how we must spend TANF funds. Am I correct?
You are correct.
Okay, so what you're saying is 30% of TANF can be spent on social services block grant?
10%. So 30% total can be transferred. Only 10% can go to social services block grant. That would leave 20% that we could transfer to CCDF for childcare.
So you could. Now, if we look at it in terms of part of how it was split before it was childcare
Yes.
and cash assistance. Okay. So if you take 10% for social services, and then you mentioned, okay, so childcare and then food assistance. Okay, explain food assistance.
SNAP.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, because that was, okay, when I look at that.
No, WIC is with KDHE.
Okay, so I had another question, but when you were speaking about that, but however you're spending it, you are following those 4 guidelines for how we spend the money.
Correct. And yes.
And less for, what's the percentage you spend on childcare?
We do not transfer TANF to childcare. We have the ability to do that, but we are not doing that currently.
Representative Carpenter, do you have a question or comment?
Just for my clarification, so SNAP isn't part of this?
No, SNAP is
Okay.
not part of
It's
this,
off
but our
budget.
eligibility
It's-
workers process all of those applications at the same
Okay.
time.
I just wanted to be clear that we have, the only thing we have in is TANF cash assistance. That would be, so when we're talking SNAP, that's not in this $100 million budget.
Oh, no, it is
Okay,
not.
just, I was just trying to figure that out. But we do spend all of our money, you know, So I'm wondering, do you get more money than we do? Obviously, in Missouri, you're from Missouri, right? Or are we talking about Kansas?
Kansas.
Okay, so we spend all of our money, it's already, so is there some way that we can spend that better? I mean, one of the things that we,
Yes.
well, you know, and leverage more funds. So by what, not funding childcare, for instance, like if doing it out of a different pot or something like that?
So there are several things that happen with our TANF block grant. So as you can see, it's,
I apologize for being late.
no, you're fine. You are fine. So for example, on this screen, what you will see is that first line is the TANF cash assistance. That's the money that goes directly to families on their EBT card. And when I say money, for a family of 4 in the state of Kansas, that monthly allotment can be anywhere from $450 to $500, depending on the county that the family lives in. And so that's the money that goes directly to them. Then the non-recurrent short-term benefits, and we haven't used those in a couple of years, those are things like rent, that we can help with rent. But there are some federal guidelines around that stipulate that we can only assist a family with a non-recurring short-term benefit for 4 months. So, and you have to have a means to be able to maintain whatever it is that we're helping you with. So if you are behind on your rent, but now you have a job, and you have a good shot at being able to keep up with your rent, we can pay up to 4 months of your back rent, knowing that you are going to be able to maintain that rent. If you still don't have a job, there's no way that you're going to be able to maintain that. We cannot pay for those 4 months of back rent for you. So that's kind of how a non-recurrent short-term benefit works. Employment services is the dedicated staff that we have per Kansas statute to basically provide case management services for those families who receive TANF. And the GOALS program is a program that we no longer have.
So we spend, though, on foster care, we have foster care. And
We do, so there's is money.
20 million or so?
We do.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, I'm just trying to get our arms around where we could offload that onto something else and use the TANF with that. And I'm doing this from memory, so I'm really struggling here. But
TANF.
and I know we fund JAG-K.
Yes, and so TANF is pretty broad. As Representative Ballard mentioned, there are 4 federal statutory purposes for TANF. They're pretty loose. And so we can do a lot within those. And even within DCF is a huge agency. So some of the money, for example, what I'm saying goes to the social services block grant, that's on the PPS side of the house. I don't see that money in economic and employment services on the other side of the house. So we do have money that's going into some various places. And then I think we have one more screen, maybe? One more? Or was that it? Oh, thank you. Here we go. All right. This is a breakdown of some of the grants that we have. So as you can see, I mentioned earlier sending out an RFP so that we could fund some services. Domestic violence, those services, we do, per federal statute, have to provide those services for recipients of TANF. And so that is a separate RFP that we issue because it has to be, you have to fall into a certain category of being able to provide domestic violence services for individuals in the state of Kansas. And then the others that you see are those that responded to the RFP. We went through a competitive bidding process and selected those for funding based on that. And now I think we have maybe just one more. These are our non-competitive awards. Heartland RADAC is our substance abuse counseling services. Again, we provide those services for individuals who are receiving TANF. As part of the HOPE Act, we do have a program called the Suspicion-Based Drug Testing Program. And so Heartland RADAC provides those services. So if we've identified that an individual has a need for those services, we would refer them to Heartland RADAC and they would take it from there. And I think the others are pretty self-explanatory. Just some of the requirements that we have, you're fine. The maintenance of effort, so there are some maintenance of effort requirements. So we do use some of our TANF spending to satisfy the maintenance of effort requirement for our CCDF block grant. So we do shift some funds for that. And we also use the state income tax credit. The 4-year-old at risk program is funds that we transfer to KSDE. So we use those funds for that also. The MOE requirement is based on our work participation rate. So if we meet our work participation rate, then we are required to we can meet the 75% requirement for the MOE. If we do not meet our work participation rate, then we have to come up with the 80% for the MOE. So far, we are meeting our work participation rate, so we've been able to maintain that lower amount.
Maybe on that one.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Actually, 2 questions, but since you just said that work participation rate, okay, explain that. How many hours they work, or how is that working?
It varies by household type, like the individuals in your household. So there's a certain number of hours that you would have to be engaged in federally allowable work participation if you are a single parent. There's a higher amount if there's a 2-parent household. It's typically around 30 hours a week that you would have to maintain, and I can get you those specific numbers so that you can track that. But yes, there are definitely there are work participation numbers that individuals have to meet in order, not only for us to be able to count them in our work participation rate, but in order for them to continue to receive TANF. So our career navigators are working with those families. They're checking in with them at least monthly. And if we have someone who is not meeting work participation, we want to address that. What's going on? Why are you not doing that? And if there's an issue that we need to address, we address that.
Back up just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Under the other plan, when we had the 5 years,
Yes.
it was 2 years that you actually could be on it, and then after that, you had to either be in school or working, and you had to work at least 20 hours a week. So how did all of this jump up to 30?
So again, I'm trying to find my little cheat sheet here. If you are a 1-parent family must work 30 hours per week. A 2-parent family, it's 35 hours per week with a maximum of 55 hours for the combined, for the 2 of them together.
Okay.
And those are the core activities that are defined in federal statute that we would count.
So that's in federal statute.
Correct.
And my other question, okay, I'm comfortable with knowing that. I shouldn't say comfortable, but I'm knowing that. But then I saw International Rescue Committee.
They are one of our grantees through a competitive bidding process, one of our grantees that provides service for individuals who are, well, let me back up. It's not just individuals who are receiving TANF. The way that we structure the most recent RFP is that they can serve families whose income does not exceed 200% of the federal poverty level. So as long as families fall below that, they can provide services for those families, which is different from the TANF benefits or TANF recipients. That rate is about, it's somewhere between 17 and 19% of the federal poverty level, depending on the county and the family size.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, committee, any other questions? Dr. Whiteside.
Yes.
I'm going to take a pause right here and just see, what I'm curious is, and I'm not sure, how much more of a presentation do you have? I didn't mean to interrupt you right there.
Is that it? I think that's it. That was it.
My timing is perfect. So committee, kind of what I'm interested in. Again, I go back to the chance meeting with Dr. Jordan 6 weeks ago, and then a recollection of some budget-related conversation with TANF. Is there anything, and I would pose this question to either one of you, is there anything that, as you've listened to each other talk, as you've listened to our questions, and you think about the overall efficiency and administrative of these benefits and services, is there anything that we could do, we could learn from Dr. Jordan, or state of Kansas could, I'm curious as to if there's any synergies that we can gain from this, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
I would say so. I'll go ahead. I would say so. And the reason is, as I've said, our role at DCF is to make sure that that household has benefits, but to connect them. We cannot be out in the community walking with them to the utility company and doing things like, we can't do that. We don't have the staff for that, and that's not our role. So when I say that we want our families to be stable, connected, and progressing toward their goals, connected means knowing where in the community they can go to get those needs met that we cannot meet. And so that's how I think there's some synergy.
Jordan, please come to the mic. And Representative Orpez as well.
So my question is, to you, Doctor, is when you talked about the RFPs, is 10% about the average for administration fees?
That is, it's not the average. That is the federal administrative cap for TANF, is 10%.
That's on the.
Yes, and so we would put that in our written agreements with any grantee that we have, because my administrative staff also fall into that category. So they count toward our total 10% of our total block grant.
Okay, so when you talk about RFPs, everybody's doing the 10%?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's what I want clarification on. Thank you.
Final thought just on the previous question. No, I think Dr. Whiteside-Hicks said it very well, just in terms of finding efficiency and being out and leveraging our ability to be in the community. And again, you work with us as one partner, you trigger then the next level of all the United Ways, and then you trigger the local community partners that they have all across the state of Kansas. And as I said, it's been happy to share the information with you all, kind of as you're looking at what potential options exist and what we can do to work collaboratively together. I think it's just, what do we do and how do we find ways to be more efficient and effective with the dollars that we have, and how do we make this money support the needs of households that desperately need it. I know that we see the demand and get the calls every day, so I look to you all to see what can we do to try to figure out ways to help make sure that those calls go answered.
So Dr. Jordan, I'm not going to propose a hypothetical, but if it's the United Way of the greater Kansas City area, and that plays over into the state of Kansas with Wyandotte, Johnson, et cetera, if there was a need that the state of Kansas said, oh, by the way, we could really use some help, would the connection be between you two, or how would? And again, I'm going back to the Missouri example. I don't know. I'm trying to think, yes, if there's a way to do that. How do we do it?
So what I can say is that when an organization is responding to an RFP, they're telling us what areas of the state specifically they are able to serve. And then we are going to write that into our legally binding agreement with them. So if it's all 105 counties, then that's it. If it's only these 3 counties, then that just tells us that we need to then identify other organizations that can provide services in the other parts of the state to make sure that we're fully covered.
Yeah. And with the project we launched, it was one simply of you work with one common United Way, and then the United Way takes on the administrative responsibility in the state of Missouri to make sure we're at least offering the service in all 125 counties. At the end of the project, as the slide showed, we wound up reaching and providing assistance in 89 out of those 125 in roughly 60 days. So we were pretty happy with the coverage and our ability to leverage the funds.
Cool. Well, thank you. Committee, any other questions for today? Representative Reese.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. One is a comment. I really like what's being done in Missouri. And one of the things that I've been concerned about TANF is it almost feels like what we used to call the Bank of KDOT, where money was coming out, and it didn't feel like it was being used in its intended purposes, and plus all of the hoops the person had to jump through in order to even receive it, discourage people from even trying to apply for it. And so thus we have more and more money in the bank because people aren't accessing it. This would really help because people call 211 all the time and asking for those primary things, like you said. It's rent and utilities, food. I know my constituents call me for that, and I refer them to 211, because I know that helps them. So, You know, and I don't know if there's a certain percentage of funding that could be, you know, if there's a way to make this partnership and a certain amount of funding, TANF funding is just always goes for that purpose, I think people would be much more directly, much more directly benefit. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Steens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know this is how I'm trying to wrap it around in my head. I kind of see like the social workers in a way. But we were just talking about, providing those services, and I was not familiar with that number, the 211, so that's something I've learned today. Do you kind of help them to like get to that next level if they, need maybe to get office services, or is your role really just to make sure that they get those, maybe connected with those other agencies, and also just making sure that they get the TANF or whatever it is that they need to pay their rent, utilities, food, whatever it may be?
Good question. The 211 side is really that information and referral. It is, I need help with my rent, I don't know where to go. And so it's then that connection to the agency, or if we have an internal program, it's, hey, we think you might be eligible for one of our internal programs, we're gonna go ahead and just screen you there. But the 211 is really just the front door, the empathetic voice, and trying to get people to know there is help available and then connected to those resources. The rest of the team internally at either United Way or the partner agencies that are doing direct services, those are the care navigator, social worker, caseworker, depending on kind of what their title and their role is. That is the work they do. So I kind of wear two different hats in terms of how people access the system and then the support they get provided, which is ultimately that pathway to that longer term stability.
Okay. I've got Representative Reese and then Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just so that the committee knows, the agencies that you work with, that you refer to, don't they also contact you and just let you know, here, this is how much funding we've got left for rent or for utilities? I mean, don't they keep you updated, so that you're not trying to refer somebody to an agency that's tapped out?
That is the goal. We do, part of our standard process is we do at least once a year an entire agency update. So like, here's every program, service, intake process you've got. Let's make sure somebody signs off on it. And then there is the ad hoc requests. Hey, you're sending us people for rent assistance, we're tapped out, or that program has expired, or you're having people call in at 8 a.m. on Monday, but we've moved to an online application. We need you to update your information and do that. Or we do get the occasional, like, hey, we're only doing a food pantry. You keep sending us folks who need their dog, like, spayed or neutered. And it's like, okay, that's our bad. Maybe we have it wrong in the database, or we corrected that. But usually we're trying to do both, consistent outreach and then ad hoc requests.
Okay. Representative Ballard?
Following up on that as well, I'll be very honest, I have been very skeptical of how the money has been used. And in fact, I had an audit approved so we could look at that. And that's why I asked about the 4 guidelines. And then when I heard you say that those 4 requirements are kind of loose, I would say, yes, I agree, they're very loose, because it seems like when you can't find money anywhere else, let's look at TANF, and we're able to do it. And, the state of Kansas, you may not know, was the first state to receive at the time, right after Clinton, when Clinton was in office, the $102 million. We were the first state to ever receive that grant, okay? And so we're looking at that, but it was presented as it was workability or employability, that you were to try and prepare the person to work, to have a job, and then be self-sustaining, taxpayer, the whole bit. Would you say it's still that? And the reason I asked that question is when you reduce it to 2 years, before you could be on it for 5 lifetime unless the state made some changes. So that way you could go to community college, you could get a degree, you could do all kind of things, which was adding towards the workability and that employee. Okay. Would you say it's still that, or it's gotten so loose that you could do other things?
That is still the federal expectation for TANF. What I understand is that the regulations in terms of those 4 purposes are loose intentionally to give states the autonomy to develop a TANF program the way that best fits that state. The 24 months, it depends. 60 months still is the federal maximum for someone to be on TANF, and that's lifetime, and your TANF months in other states count. They all count. 24 months sometimes is doable. It depends on what your barriers are. So if you have substance abuse issues, or you are fleeing domestic violence, things like our mental health issues, 24 months is not a lot of time. We're going to spend most of that time trying to get you to the point that you can start engaging in some job readiness activities. Whereas if the company you've worked for the last 20 years just shut down, you have some marketable skills, we can likely find you another job or help you find another job in a couple of months. So the months, it really does depend. And what I will say is, because we have 24 months lifetime in the state of Kansas, that makes the work that we do that much more important. So the people that we're serving don't have time for us to be, oh, I think you should go there. Well, maybe you should go there. Well, let's try this. They need us to have it together, to have the resources and the connections in the community that they're going to need so that they can be successful, so that we don't waste their TANF months.
All right, committee, any other questions? And I'll offer it back to our 2 presenters. Any other comments you want to leave us with today? For me, this has been tremendously helpful. And I hope there's an opportunity for us to connect some dots here and do good for Kansas. Okay, so with that, we're going to adjourn here in 1 second. I will remind you, tomorrow we're meeting. We've got Kylie Childs from Leading Age Kansas will be here. May not take this long, but and then next week, field trip, the 988 call center. All right, thank you, committee. We're adjourned.